This is the mustard that built empires.
Each place, each region, each food has its own story to tell.
Oi! Yeah. It's the most dangerous kind of farming I've ever known. I would rather fish for shark.
I'm exploring Britain to discover how our soils and seas have shaped our tastes and traditions, because our food is who we are.
Those were the shoes that were put on the cattle, so they would fit those.
They really shoe cattle?
They are.
Alongside me on this journey are horticulturalist Alice Fowler, botanist James Wong.
It's like a flavour trip, like I can see it's a mushroom, but my tongue's telling me it's something else. That's fantastic.
Archaeologist Alex Langlands and historian Lucy Worsley.
That is soft cheese.
That's soft cheese.
It makes itself.
Yeah.
You just leave old milk lying around.
This is the story of our food. This time, we're in the west of Scotland, a wild landscape where food tells a story of history as well as of soil and climate. This is a place where food was once all about survival, a place revolutionised by the coming of the railways.
That's basically the most exciting thing I've ever done in my life.
I'm going to be travelling by all manner of trains, right through the heart of the Western Highlands, to see how a story of subsistence became a story of supply. But my journey begins in the far north. I'm starting here, where the land fights you at every turn. This is no place for big commercial agriculture. The soil is too thin, the slopes too steep. The earliest foods here were wild. The red deer is Britain's largest and oldest native mammal. We've been killing and eating them since the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago. As people settled and began to farm, deer were pushed back into the wilderness of the Highlands. It's their last true stronghold. This is Atterdale, 30,000 acres of Highland estate in Wester Ross.
Tom Watson, pleased to meet you, and welcome to Atterdale.
Tom Watson is Atterdale's gamekeeper. He's a professional deer stalker, responsible for managing the deer on the estate.
So how many deer have you got altogether?
On the hinds we have here, we've got probably about 650 to 700. I mean, you can never say exactly, but within that's pretty close to what we have. And we probably have in the region of about 300 stags. And
that's a nice ratio for the boys.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's quite good, yes.
Deer hunting is a tradition that reaches back to before estates like this existed, part of a deep-rooted belief that every Highlander had a right to a deer from the hill and a salmon from the river.
How far up we got to go up the hill?
It's 8 miles from the bottom lodge up to the one at the top.
Since the demise of their last major predator, the wolf, deer numbers have been steadily on the rise. Nowadays they're controlled in order to limit their effect on the landscape and to prevent the deer from running out of food. Left to themselves, they'll overgraze and weaker animals will starve.
It's necessary, is it?
It has to be done because red deer have no natural enemies apart from man. A few get taken as calves by golden eagles and foxes, but as a rule, once they get into mature animals, then there's nothing can do them any harm. We have to control their numbers for their own benefit. Traditionally, years ago, it used to be done as a sport, but now it's more of an industry. Providing.
What's the difference between doing it as a sport and doing it as an industry?
Well, years ago, it was done by wealthy landowners, and the venison had no real value.
Right.
Whereas nowadays, venison is very much sought after, and it's a healthy meat.
For centuries, hunting was about the basic need to eat. But shifts in land ownership transformed this ancient custom. After Queen Victoria adopted Balmoral as her Scottish retreat in 1848, all things Highland suddenly became fashionable. Stag hunting got the royal seal of approval, and venison became a trophy rather than a subsistence staple. Until recently, 95% of Scottish venison had to be exported, but its popularity in Britain has grown rapidly, and demand now outstrips supply. Before the stalk begins, Tom checks the rifle and the ability of the shooter with some target practice.
The rifle we're using today is a 308 Winchester.
The idea is to hit a 10-centimetre target at a distance of 100 metres.
Would you like to take a shot, Giles, just to know what you're experiencing?
Yeah,
okay?
I've never fired a gun, not even an air gun.
Okay. Well, this is empty. There's nothing in there. Put this hand back here and prop that up into your shoulder.
Can't we just go back to the pub now and tell stories?
That's it. Now pull your bolt back, push it forward and down. And don't touch your trigger until you're ready for it to shoot. Now get your eye into there.
Okay. Your man's a long way
Don't
away, is he?
you worry about
You
the man.
sure?
Yeah, I'm 100% sure.
Okay.
I've only lost 6 gillies so far this year,
that's
so
all right
another
then.
one won't make any difference.
Because in truth, I'm going to have trouble with just hitting that mountain.
No, you won't. You're okay. Now keep a good hold of it with your hands here. Keep a tight grip of it and get it
Yeah.
in onto your shoulder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is he alive, the geezer?
Just about.
But really,
Half an inch, 11 o'clock.
That's all right. Half an inch out of the dead centre at 11 o'clock, so that's good.
what are we saying? We're saying that if that had been a deer.
Oh, it's dead, absolutely. That's your very first shot you've ever fired, so I wouldn't be embarrassed about that. You should be quite happy.
To find the herds, we have to head even higher into the hills. There are no fences. The deer are free to wander anywhere. They're wild animals, and they're naturally wary.
There's a group up in at the start of these cliffs up here. The lowest of the cliffs are just on the left-hand edge. There's a bunch of deer there.
Where's this?
Yeah. See the lowest of the cliffs here? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, if you come to the left-hand edge of them, the left-hand corner, and underneath there's a bunch of deer standing in there.
Gosh, there he is.
Yeah.
How did he manage to do that? I mean, big antlers.
Yeah, he's quite a good. He's not an enormous stag, but he's a shootable stag.
He is looking right at us, isn't
Yeah, he's looking at us. In view of the fact that they're there, what we'll do here, rather than have them spot us, is we'll move on down another little bit to the end of the lake, and then we'll angle up and we'll come along, see if we can get up above him, okay?
Brilliant.
The weapon might be modern, but the basic skills of the stalk are ancient. Like the first hunter-gatherers and the clansmen who followed them, Tom uses the lie of the land as cover and keeps us downwind of the deer. The idea is to kill the animal without disturbing the rest of the herd.
Sometimes I've seen us crawling on our stomachs down a stream, probably for up to half a mile. Sometimes, just try to keep out of sight down streams, and then eventually the last little bit, you're on your stomach. You could be crawling through pools of water over rocks, because you can't let them see you, you can't let them hear you, and certainly not let them smell you, or they're gone. You want to do this? Yeah.
The last few meters, we have to be extremely cautious. James, who's shooting today, will aim for the animal's heart and lungs. The telescopic sight ensures absolute accuracy and a quick, clean kill.
Just wait a sec, James. Okay, shoot him now, James. Well done. He's done. He's dead.
It's the first thing I've seen shot. It was kind of beautiful and sort of terrible at the same time, which they thought to be, and it made comprehensible to me because I had a bit of context. But to crawl up next to him, be in there next to him as he shoots it, and suddenly Tom is the boss. He says, "Kill it now." Pow, falls over. That is what eating meat is about. What happened here on the mountain was the way it ought to be.
All the meat from these deer will get eaten. And so in this way, a sport for the rich and an essential task of land management provides food that is accessible to everyone. At times, the highlands seemed an almost empty wilderness. It is an unforgiving land, where it's hard to grow anything. What you planted here meant the difference between life and death. To the south, in Argyll, mountains loom over the landscape, where horticulturalist Alice Fowler is digging up the truth behind a food that's deeply rooted in Highland history, the potato.
This is Auchendrane. It's one of the last remaining townships in Scotland. Once upon a time, there were thousands of these all across the landscape, and they're small communal spaces where people paid rent to live and work as a community on the land. The key to survival here was getting the most out of the soil, and nothing provided greater reward than the humble potato. Packed with energy, they were excellent fuel for the working man or woman. Well, I'm here to do some potato digging, and traditionally this is called tatty-howking. It's really quite hard work, so I'm going to find myself a few helpers. how many of you guys have grown potatoes before? Yeah, do you grow potatoes at school? Yeah, so you know how to dig up a potato? Yeah? The potato is now so much a British staple that it's easy to forget its South American roots. It arrived here in the 16th century, and there can be few who know more about it than potato expert Alan Romans.
Potatoes are the only crop that you can live on almost 100%.
Seriously?
Lacks a couple of vitamins and that's all. I live on a lot of potatoes, so you tend, if you live on a lot of potatoes, to be a particular shape. Any idea what that would be?
Bulgy.
Yes, indeed. Stocky. A little bit high on the carbohydrate, but, you know, there's just enough protein there to get by, you know?
In townships like Auchendrayne, fertile land was in short supply. Oats had long been the carbohydrate of choice, and the Scots were initially suspicious of the new arrivals from the Americas. But potatoes had grown in the Andes, and they could be grown in the unforgiving mountains of the Highlands if given a chance. So what did the Scottish think of potatoes when they first started appearing?
Not a lot. I mean, potatoes became important on a European scale in Ireland, first of all. And by 1690, 90% of the population of Ireland were dependent on potatoes. But there wasn't a single potato grown in Scotland at that time. It really wasn't until 2 or 3 generations later, sometime in the 18th century, that potatoes became anything like important in Scotland.
But slowly they became accepted.
Well, very quickly, once society changed, you know, potatoes are really the crop of change, of revolution. And when people were put off the land into smaller, more peripheral bits of land, like in Ireland, they could only survive on potatoes.
The Western Highlands were once filled with thriving communities that all but vanished in the Highland clearances. Less than 30 miles from Auchendrayne is Araconan, a township cleared by force. The clan system had begun to break down, and landowners realised that sheep were far more profitable than tenants. From the late 1700s, people began to be cleared from the land. People were driven to the edges, to small holdings known as crofts, but they still had potatoes. So all this land went over to sheep, and all the people just had to move?
Yeah, and the weird thing is, thanks to the fact that they grew potatoes, the population went up. I mean, people did move away to America and Canada, but the vast majority stayed. They were indentured labourers,
and that was just because
kelp.
they could survive off potatoes?
Yeah, and they lived off potatoes.
And how much was potatoes part of their diet when they were in these crops?
One estimated that 3/4 of the population lived for 3/4 to 90% of the time on potatoes.
Potatoes helped the Highlanders keep their heads above water as the world around them was changing. But nature had a cruel trick in store. Ireland was hit by a devastating potato blight in the 1840s, and Scotland wasn't far behind.
That's when the population in the Highlands really started to disintegrate. The mass migration started from about 1849 on, and it coincides exactly with blight. And you can see why.
And that's the same as the Irish potato famine, right?
Absolutely the same. Same time, same disease. I mean, there were sporadic outbreaks of it before, but 1845 was the first year that it was really serious. 1846, nothing grew.
The clearances and the blight changed life in the Highlands, but Scotland didn't give up on the potato. The failure of the crop added impetus to a new movement in breeding, a movement in which Scotland was to become a world leader. The cooler climate here is excellent for breeding a disease-free crop. Breeders across the country started to compete to come up with varieties that can make their name, and they still do. Okay, you got potatoes.
20 more buckets for potatoes.
Hey, you guys did better than I thought. I thought you hadn't got many potatoes, but you got lots and lots of potatoes. These days, nearly 77,000 acres of potatoes are being grown in Scotland. You got muddy. A crop worth £186 million a year. The potato had a slow start in Scotland, but it's earned its place here, especially in the crofts and townships of the West. A food of survival and a food of progress.
Head further west to the coast, and the mountains finally fall away into the Atlantic. Highlanders, driven from the land, came here in search of sheltered harbours and the rich harvests of the sea. Archaeologist Alex Langlands is discovering how fish landed in Mallock was more than just a food. It was a way of life.
The weather's not been brilliant for fishing recently here, and we've got a number of boats in the harbour, and they fish today for things like scallops, sprats and prawns as well. But at one time, this harbour would have been absolutely teeming with boats here for one thing in particular, and that was herring.
Clearances and the potato blight forced Highlanders to the coast.
By 1890, 3/4 of crofters in the west of Scotland relied on fishing for their main income. Herring were known as silver darlings. The men fished for them and the women prepared them for sale. They were called herring girls. George Laurie's family have been in the herring business for 4 generations, and in Mallaig, there are reminders of the industry everywhere.
So this is one of the original factories, yeah?
Yeah, one of the old ones still left.
Today, it's a joiner's workshop.
This is where the bench was, here, cutting. Bang of glass, in would come the herring on the bench.
Yeah.
And they all kept going.
So you have a whole row of women here, and your mother was one of them?
She worked here for a while, yeah.
George's mother gutted herring here, and his father worked in the chimney upstairs.
Had all of your kippers up in here then?
Yeah.
And you can actually still see the smoke blackening there on all the timbers.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. It's original. I mean, on a busy day in this area, you couldn't see for smoke. If there was no wind and the smoke hung down over the village, and a lot of the women would have the washing in the line. They're running to take the washing in. The wind shifted, the smoke would drift over there.
Because all of this smoke which would be pouring out the top of these smokeries. Your father and your mother worked in this building?
Mother was spelled down below, yeah, cutting. And Dad was smoking here.
So what's it like then to sort of stand here in the footsteps of your father and see his place of work?
Ah, it's great. It's great seeing it again. I'm so pleased it's still there.
Yeah.
You know.
Herring are a migratory species, the shoals skirting round the coast of Scotland all the way down to Norfolk. The herring girls followed the fish. Barely out of their teens, they gutted, salted and packed herring from dawn to dusk.
Herring time is here again, and all along the east coast the air is charged with the excitement that comes before the big push. Knives are sharp, lips are red, and the fisher girls are ready. No modern machinery could work faster or slicker than the flashing fingers of the Scots lassies who come south every year to this urgent, bustling job.
The peak of the industry came in the early 20th century. By the 1970s, herring stocks had all but collapsed. There were no longer any herring landed in Mallaig. The last traditional smokehouse here is a family one. Jaffe's is named after George's dad and now run by his son, Geoffrey.
This is where the herring girl really makes her money. Geoffrey's going to show me how to gut a herring.
Herring were either salted and packed for export or smoked into kippers. Either way, they had to be gutted.
What you're hoping to do is put the blade of the knife in there, twist and pull out. And take that long gut out. And that's what you're looking. Simple.
Simple.
Yeah, go for it.
It's not happening, Jeff.
When you're pulling it through, use the knife to twist the knife to cut as well.
Just pulled its face off, Jeff.
That's good. You're getting it out. So
right, I've got the.
So you hold the head, nick it off.
Yeah.
And then you need to take the bottom part out.
That's that.
Yeah.
Right, it's going to snap.
That's good.
So that's the long gut, yeah?
That's what you're looking for, yeah.
Right. Now, how quickly will I be expected to do that?
60 a minute.
60 a minute?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's 1 second.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is amazing.
Yeah, I can't do it as fast as that, so...
But that's what the girls would have done.
Yes.
The girls worked in teams of 3, 2 gutters and a packer. Between them, they'd earn just 1 shilling per barrel. These days, the herring are prepared by machine, but they're still smoked in the traditional way.
So well, be ashamed to lose them now.
Yeah, this is my grandfather's hooks.
Really?
So you can understand how old they actually are.
The fish are hung in the brick kiln.
It was 11 high, so you can imagine we can put over a ton of kippers in there.
There's a lot of fish here. OK, we'll keep them coming. This is a pretty risky job, Jeff. Is this what you used to do as a lad?
Yes. There's one there. There's a swinger there.
There's a swinger? Oh, there's one. Is that what you call one falling off?
That's a swinger.
A swinger.
Oak chips from old whiskey barrels are lit to provide the smoke.
So you've got a fantastic... an absolutely fantastic aroma there of...
That gives a good flavour.
Definitely whiskey in that. Lovely. And does that find its way into the fish, ultimately?
It does, yeah. OK.
Are we done? Because I've got to get out of here now. Oh. Oh. Blimey. Oh. That was your eyes were going a bit.
Give you a good flavour, eh?
Yeah.
Good taste.
Good bit of whiskey oak barreled smoke there. The wind's sort of kicking back and now it's really...
There's no electricity used there. It's all just done by draft. And,
Oak shavings. The smoker in the wartime was classed as such an important job that it was a reserved occupation.
Really? But that's an indication of just how important this industry was then to Scotland, to Great Britain, that the smoker himself was a reserved occupation. Didn't have to go and fight because he had more important work to do here. The kippers are smoked overnight. The lorries, like theirs, jugged, steeping them in freshly boiled water for 6 minutes.
Fantastic aroma. Let's take that on there.
There you go, there's yours. You pull the bone down, you see. You just lift it off the bone.
That's delicious. That really fills the mouth. It's meaty fish.
That's the way to eat them with your fingers. That's what you're giving those for.
Tasting that egg.
Yeah.
Scottish food used to be all about living off the land, catching, farming or growing what you could eat. Transport is the key to the story of the west of Scotland. This is a remote and wild landscape, revolutionised by the coming of the railways in the Victorian era. Rail meant food could travel. Starting in Mallaig, I'm heading south to Glasgow and beyond.
This lovely old thing is the Jacobite, a steam service that runs regularly on a Mallaig extension of the West Highland Line. Once upon a time, it took livestock, herring, kippers, all that sort of thing down south. These days, as these people pouring onto the platform testify, it's more famous for its role in the Harry Potter films.
Abracadabra.
Oh, you turned me into a not very good TV presenter. How do you manage that? That's an incredible spell.
Mallaig was built on herring, and fresh fish needed to get to market quickly. The line here opened in 1901 and connected Mallaig to the rest of the world.
That's basically the most exciting thing I've ever done in my life. Properly. How many of these do you need?
As much as they could go. Like I say, 3 to 4 tons you're burning this whole journey.
Right, so I can do some more?
Keep on going.
It's properly, this is serious.
Within a single generation, the railways expanded across Scotland. They allowed the wealthy to journey to their Highland estates in style, but these were also working trains that delivered some of Scotland's best produce to market.
I'm not drunk, it's just the way that I walk. Neil.
Pleased to meet you.
Neil MacLeod has lived and worked along this line for 25 years.
So until the trains came along, they were pretty cut off up here.
Well, I mean, the train itself opened up Mallaig. There was nothing in Mallaig. There was a road that went as far as Arisaig, which was built by Telford up to 1815. But there was a path, but no set road to Mallaig itself. When it was first built, the railway line went straight along to the pier itself, the steamer pier.
Out
onto the pier itself, yeah. So the trains would come alongside, the ladies would get the herring and the whitefish, and then they would pack it into the large barrels, and then they would be picked up and put on the trains. And the trains, sometimes in the height of the season, there'll be 3 or 4 night trains leaving every night.
Livestock as well?
Yes, I mean, there was a mart in Fort William, and they would have sheep, about 5,000 sheep a year were coming into the market, and also the lairds as well, for the living down in London, and those people wanted to go up onto the estates and start doing a bit of fishing and shooting as well.
The arrival of the trains must have really broadened the possibilities for Scotland.
It opened up. I mean, anywhere that the train went, everybody could see the potential of it, and they immediately, industry started building up on either side of it. So yes, I mean, it was a huge development.
I'm continuing through the Highlands towards the cities and markets of the south. Here, the mountains pull back to reveal the lush grassland of Ayrshire. This is dairy country. Historian Lucy Worsley is discovering how a 17th century recipe changed cheesemaking here forever.
It's really hard to find out about the lives of farmers in history. They don't leave many records. But this farm is just outside Dunlop in Ayrshire. These are Ayrshire cows. And here we have got a written account from the 1790s. And this gentleman says, in the statistical account of Scotland, that Dunlop is all about cheese. He says that cheese is the great and almost the only business of this village, Dunlop.
Anne Dorwood is a local cheesemaker, and she still produces cheese from her Ayrshire herd.
So, what's the plan, boss?
Well, we're going to get them milked this afternoon, so you can get them into the byre, tie them up, chain them up, and we'll start milking.
Ayrshire cattle turn Ayrshire grass into high-quality milk. They're a native, local breed closely linked to the land. For subsistence farmers in the west of Scotland, meat was a luxury. Instead, they kept their cows for milk, butter and cheese. This was usually a job for the women. They skimmed milk to make butter, and the rest was left to warm, go sour and thicken. It was put into a cloth bag to separate the curds from the whey.
This one's been training overnight.
That's right.
So there's some good squidgy stuff in here. That's curd.
That's a curd.
It feels nice. Oh, there's some more dripping out. But that's essentially it. That is soft cheese.
That's soft cheese.
It makes itself. You just leave old milk lying around.
Aye, yeah.
Sometimes this happens in my fridge, I have to tell you. That looks delicious.
Crowdy.
Crowdy, that's what it's called around here. Is it called that throughout Scotland?
Yeah, it was traditionally probably a cheese of the Highlands.
Yeah.
They made daily and eaten quite quickly.
And do you eat it every day?
Not every day, no.
Crowdy was fresh and didn't keep. Harder, longer-lasting cheeses were tricky to make and recipes highly sought after. In the late 1680s, a native of Dunlop called Barbara Gilmore returned to her homeland after spending more than a decade in Ireland. She fled to escape religious turbulence in Scotland, and she came back with a recipe for full-fat, hard cheese.
There aren't any portraits of Barbara that survive, or any contemporary written records, but there is something. Here we've got the stone that marks her burial spot. 1732, here's her name, Barbara Gilmore, and something else. We've still got her cheese.
Barbara's was a groundbreaking cheese. Her method spread right across Scotland by the end of the 18th century, and Dunlop became the Scottish equivalent of cheddar. It's a name that isn't so familiar today, and that's because it fell from favour as milk production became centralised. When Anne started cheesemaking in the 1980s, she resurrected Barbara's recipe. She uses starter culture and rennet to get the process going.
So the big difference is that here we're using the whole milk, aren't we? Not just the skimmed milk.
That's right, it's whole milk. That was what was unique in Barbara Gilmore's days, that she was the first person to make this cheese with whole milk. And it made such a difference to the cheese.
It's a whole new ball game, isn't it? You can make a long-lasting cheese, you can store it, you can transport it long distances.
That's right. It would make life an awful lot easier just being able to sell it further afield and keep it longer.
So it's a massive transformation from cheesemaking. It goes from being a daily job in the farmhouse for the family. It becomes a business.
Yeah,
well,
a product that could be marketed.
It's big business in Dunlop, isn't it? This milk, I want to dive into it because it looks so creamy and delicious, but I think that you'd be cross if I were to do that.
Once the milk is set, it's cut up and then heated gently to speed up the separation of the curds and the whey.
Oh, it's quite warm. It's 27 degrees warm. It would be delicious in there.
That'd be nice and cosy.
Yeah.
The curds are then drained and packed into moulds.
Oh, it's really heavy. I thought that milkmaids just sort of faffed around in their dairy, sort of mixing things. I didn't think they had to do heavy lifting.
The soil, the climate, and the lush Ayrshire grass all help to give the cheese its characteristic flavour. As does several months in the maturing room.
Anything from 6 months up to a year.
This is a cheese that can keep and be sold somewhere else. It's a long way from the short shelf life of Crowdy.
You have to check the cheeses, don't you?
We need to turn them, brush them to keep the mould under control, and turn them all the time while they're ripening.
So how often do you have to turn them over?
Oh, to start with, every 2 or 3 days, just when they first come in here.
Every 2 or 3 days?
And then after they've sort of developed the rind, you could do it a wee bit less.
So they need a lot of looking after?
Aye, well, there's a lot of work looking after these.
Oh.
And then you get a wee plug out.
That's really nice. Let's have some more.
It's got a nice mild nutty flavour. The Dunlop cheese tends to get a sort of sharper aftertaste once it's very mature.
Is that what people want, the really strong tasting cheeses?
Looking for something a wee bit more special.
Extreme cheese experiences. So your milk has been turned into gold.
Well, a little bit of gold maybe.
Oh.
I'm heading south by steam. Next stop, Fort William. The fish wagons that brought herring from Mallaig are long since gone. Freight still travels on this line, and these days it has its own trains. I'm hitching a ride on one of the regular freight services.
Keep learning. How you doing, John? Aye, not bad. Step aboard, Chuck. Aye, just help yourself.
John Thompson is going to be my guide.
Make yourself at home.
I can get used to having my own, having my own train pick me up.
Oh, right.
Yeah, thanks for stopping.
Nothing, don't worry. Hey, John.
Freight nowadays tends to be more industrial than edible. These trains regularly haul bauxite for the aluminium industry. From Fort William, the line runs across Rannoch Moor, one of Britain's last great wildernesses. The line here took 5 years to build. It literally floats across the bog on layers of turf and brushwood. Much of the line is single track.
So why are we stopped here? What are we waiting for?
It's a single track. The train, the passenger train from Glasgow is coming up the line from Tyne.
And that bit where it spurs off, we're just hoping they've set the points right.
I can guarantee you they're set correctly. I can see them from here. So.
Okay, well, I'll trust you. But if they weren't and it comes straight for us, what's the procedure?
Follow me.
Okay. out of the
train.
In the early days of the railways, the signalman would hand out an actual brass token, giving you permission to use the line. You'd have to grab the token as you passed through each section of the track. Now it's all done electronically.
"2010 have the Richard Gorky upper time token display on."
When the line gets too slippery, sand is blasted under the leading wheels to add traction. That's not the only safety feature.
This is your genuine dead man's pedal.
That's the dead man's pedal.
This is for when basically when you're being attacked by Indians and you get hit by an arrow.
No, that's it, yeah.
So that, as long as you've got your foot on it, you keep going forward.
I keep control of the brake, yeah. If I take my foot off it, and I keep it off for about 6 or 7 seconds, emergency brake's coming.
But what if you die and slump forward?
I knew you were going to ask that. You have to reset it every minute.
So how do you do that?
Take your foot up now, please.
I'm travelling on towards Glasgow. The west of Scotland is a patchwork of landscapes, all bathed in the warmth of the North Atlantic drift and the plentiful rain that it brings. To the west, in Argyll, in the cool, moist months of autumn, highland forests and plantations come to life. Botanist James Wong is searching for a gourmet food for free, a food that has often been overlooked.
The Italians are crazy about porcini, and the French find chanterelles are a national institution. But to us British, well, should we say, we're a little bit more reticent about eating wild mushrooms. But it is such a shame. In a beautiful forest like this, it's probably one of the best places in Europe to find edible wild mushrooms.
We're unfamiliar with mushrooms because we've never really needed them. On the continent, hunger forced people to eat what they could. As an island nation, there's always been something else for us to catch or grow. Fungi are neither plant nor animal. They're a form of life based on decay. They're nature's recyclers. Here on the shores of Loch Orr is a mosaic of natural forest, parkland and plantation. Perfect if you're a mushroom. Or a mushroom hunter, like Dick Peebles.
How did you get into fungi? Did you start with plants or did you start with the fungi?
You start with everything. You start with butterflies and birds, but try making money out of that.
You can really see you've got a fantastically moist climate here. You can really see from all these mustards. I mean, this is technically temperate rainforest. Like you get in New Zealand and the north of Japan. And
it's called that North Atlantic temperate rainforest.
We're joining head chef Gary Goldie, who spends each morning foraging for wild mushrooms to put on his restaurant menu. And most of them are within 5 minutes walk of his kitchen.
You know what that one is there? I think I've had this in a risotto. It was
something
French
called
cooking.
the chanterelle. But in France, they call it the girole. If you ask for chanterelles over there, here's what you get.
I thought you had to be in like the south of France and in like a provincial woodland.
Scotland's the best place you're going to get.
Probably best in
Why doesn't anyone
Europe.
pick them here?
Well, we do.
We do. Everybody does.
Major export. Most of the ones you're getting in London now are coming from Scotland.
I had no idea.
Scottish rolls are on the menu all over the world.
The next thing you're going to tell me, you can get caviar out of here.
They need constant water, which they don't get on the continent, and that's the secret. They love acid soils, which we got plenty of here in Scotland.
Yeah.
And they need a constant supply of water. And from a little primordium, the size of a match head, to a pickable size, is about 3 weeks. It's a real slow grower, and it will become like a piece of cork if it dries out.
Yeah.
Therefore, continental summer's no use for it.
Yeah.
But Scottish summer is perfect.
Before the advent of mushroom farming in the late 18th century, all our mushrooms came from the wild. There are thousands of varieties, but only a fraction are edible. If you know what you're looking for, some are quite extraordinary.
You're going to tell me this is edible because it doesn't look all kinds of appetizing.
Only when it's cooked.
This one's known as Scarlatina bolete.
There's a fascinating aspect to this particular fungus, which is a impressive colour change in the flesh. The flesh will change colour quite dramatically from yellow to blue.
That's amazing. Is that the kind of the chemicals in the mushroom reacting to air, presumably? Oxidation?
Oxidation seems to me a likely bet.
And when you cook with this?
Cook with this, well, Gary, that'll go back to yellow, won't it?
Yeah, it turns back to yellow.
You can rewind the reaction. It's brilliant.
Fungi can be highly toxic. From the indigestible to the deadly, identification is key. Dick regards the miller's milk cap as an unsung delicacy.
It's a shame you haven't got more of these because it's got characteristics it develops when it's an adult form that help you to identify it. But have a smell of that. See what you think it smells like.
I can see why it's called Miller's. I was going to say, well, like...
You've worked that out for yourself. That is the Miller.
It smells just like cake batter.
But there are poisonous mushrooms that look just like the Miller's, so you need an expert to identify it.
When it's small like this, it's especially important to know what it is. If you feel the top of it, this one's slightly dry, but it should feel like chamois leather, like kid glove leather.
Yeah, that makes sense.
OK,
yeah.
You've already identified the smell.
So it's not only the morphology, how it looks, it's the texture as well that you're using. Because we don't do that in botany. It's just how it looks, occasionally how it smells.
The texture, the smell, the taste, and the habit as well.
Isn't taste not a great one if it's toxic? No, you find out once you poison yourself.
I identify that mushroom for the last couple of years by smell.
Mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of an underground root-like system known as mycelium. You only know about this hidden world when mushrooms pop up to release their spores.
Go round here, they start round here, they go down here, and then right round the back, they go all the way down there as well.
So this isn't a line, this is a ring.
Yeah.
So basically, this is a sign that there's a route under the ground that these are following.
Yeah.
And just sending up almost like a submarine sends up a periscope, sending up this fruiting body.
That's right, yeah.
So what's this we've got here?
This is hedgehog fungus. And you'll see in a second why it's called hedgehog fungus, but it's absolutely lovely.
Look at that.
And this is like a grade A mushroom. This is like a top drawer ingredient right outside my back door.
Oh, it's kind of like flaky cream.
Well,
flaky texture, but kind of creamy texture.
But it's also got a beautiful mushroom flavour.
Yeah, that's lovely.
A fresh flavour.
In just a couple of hours, we found more than 20 varieties of edible mushroom. It takes skill and experience to identify them all, and you have to be sure they're safe to eat. First, I'm sampling the Miller on its own.
Well, it looks sort of pathetic on its own, but...
I feel very guilty for seeing people being the only one who's allowed to eat it, but that's my perk. Right.
The big Miller.
Don't tell me what it tastes like, because I'm going to hopefully guess it myself.
Go on then.
Yeah. Eggs, kind of like eggs, kind of like steak.
Then Gary prepares the Scarlatina bolete. It turns blue when cut, but changes again in the frying pan.
The blue's gone now.
The blue's gone.
Yeah, it's really yellow as well, almost kind of like a saffron-y yellow. Lemon-flavoured mushroom.
Gary designs dishes to match every mushroom. These are angel wings served with skate.
Right, there you go.
Why, thank you.
You're not going to get rid of me.
They're delicious, Gary.
That does taste like crispy pork.
It's crispy pork.
It's like a flavour trip. Like, I can see it's a mushroom, but my tongue's telling me it's something else. That's fantastic.
I'm amazed that each one has a totally distinct flavour.
It's crisp and fresh and meaty and just delicious.
Yeah.
This is so weird. It's barbecue sauce.
Curry.
That's messed up. That's curry leaves.
Yeah.
Before today, I thought I loved wild mushrooms. I guess I had no idea what they really were compared to now. I didn't know that so many things would come in a mushroom-shaped package, but taste of coconut, of curry, of aniseed, of everything but mushroom. I mean, this is serious gourmet food that's growing out there in the car park, and no one has a clue.
I'm travelling through the west of Scotland by rail, but my freight train can only take me so far. This is Moss End in Glasgow, one of the main rail freight centres for Scotland.
Thanks very much.
I'm changing trains to make the short journey to the coast in search of a seaside treat with a continental flavour. Scotland has always been open to outside influences. It was the northernmost outpost of the Roman Empire, and from the 13th to the 16th centuries, the Old Alliance forged a strong bond with France. But if there's one culture that left its mark on Scottish food, it's the Italians.
In the 1890s, thousands of families fled the poverty of central and southern Italy for Scotland. They didn't travel in lovely comfy trains like this, and they even walked. Most of them would have been looking for passage to America, but some of them found a reason to stay.
Glasgow was one of the first ports of call, and Italians found a living to be made selling ice cream and fish and chips. A tradition now etched so deeply into the food culture that it's hard to imagine Scotland without it. The trains brought me to the coast, and this is the ferry to Millport, favoured destination of Glasgow day trippers. The Ritz Cafe is a Millport institution, a little piece of Italy that's been here for over 100 years. The current owner, known as Fast Scoop Luigi, is continuing the family tradition of making ice cream on the premises. So this is a bucket of cream fresh from the cow, is it? It looks like it. Yeah?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
What have you got in there?
It's ice cream mix. It's made to our recipe.
Right.
For generations and generations.
Is it a secret recipe?
It is. You buy the cafe, you get the secret.
What's it going to take?
15 to 20 minutes.
And how will you know when it's done? Because it'll look like ice cream.
Because it looks like ice cream. Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Is there anything special, savoury things you do?
And the hot peas, which is
hot
a seaside.
Peas, right.
Yes,
I've heard of those. And what are those, apart from just being hot peas?
It's a typical seaside tradition around the west coast. It's hot peas which have been steeped overnight, and we add our magic ingredients in it. And
more secrets?
More secrets.
Is it the same stuff as the ice cream?
Well, more or less, yeah.
Have you got any of those?
Yes, we can make a batch up.
We have a batch of those?
Yeah,
while we're waiting for the ice cream?
Yeah.
Marifat peas. Good. You could live off those.
You certainly could.
That and ice cream. You haven't thought of making that into an ice cream?
Somehow I don't think that would go.
Probably not. By 1905, there were well over 300 Italian cafes and takeaways in Glasgow alone. They were family businesses, and still are. Maria Righetti's grandfather set up the Ritz. Making ice cream probably wasn't as simple then as it is now.
No. When I was young, I had a job, I had a paddle, and you had to stir it all the time, like that. You had to keep stirring it.
Hey guys.
Her son-in-law Luigi now runs it. When did your family first come here then?
Oh, I believe my grandfather found this sector dial about 100 years ago, perhaps more. That's my grandfather, and my father, Tony Collier. He's the youngest of, I think, 11 or 12 children. They came over walking.
All the way from Italy?
All the way from Italy, but that took 2 years, stopping at various places, including London.
But could he read and write?
No.
He couldn't?
No, no. And he didn't speak English.
The shop was handed down through the generations, so it started
always
with...
been a Collier in the shop.
And the first one was your grandfather, and he was called...
Luigi Collier.
And then...
Uncle Michael. His wife was a Collier, and he was Michael Valenti.
And then after that?
My father.
And then after that?
My husband and I.
Your husband and you, and then now...
And now it's Luigi and Angela.
And Angela's your daughter?
Yeah.
Come on, that's ready now, Luigi.
Yeah, right, here we go.
You perfectionist, I don't know. When you think how long it would have taken, you know, old Signor Collier in the early 20th century, late 19th century.
A long time. Right, you ready for your cone?
Absolutely.
Would you like raspberry sauce on it?
I will, whatever you say. Do you think it should have raspberry sauce?
Yes, I think you should have raspberry on it. There you go. Not one flake, but 2 flakes.
1 flake, 2 flakes.
There you go.
I think it looks like a rabbit that has been hit by a car.
And that's homemade raspberry sauce.
Oh, that's nice. That's good stuff. That's delicious. Ice cream at the Scottish seaside is a mark of the resilient spirit that dominates the West. People have made a life here, and they've also made a future. To the north, the coastline fractures and breaks. Deep sea locks slice inland. Islands reach out into the Atlantic. This is my last stop, and it's the one place that the great Victorian railways never reached. Remote is one word for it. This is South Uist. It's in the Outer Hebrides. It's as far from anything as anywhere in Britain. It's so windy, even trees don't grow here. So it's pretty hard to imagine how you could eke out a living off the land. After the clearances, crofting was the traditional way of life in the Western Highlands and Islands, keeping a few sheep and cattle and fishing on the side. I've learned the landscape of the west of Scotland isn't a place for large-scale crops or livestock, but it is rich in natural resources, sheltered sea lochs with clean water and strong currents. 40 years ago, a new industry was pioneered in these lochs, an industry that now produces Scotland's biggest food export, salmon.
Place your first foot on the
It's a
step.
parachute I need, really, rather than a...
Yes, it is. It's quite a long way down. Be careful. Be safe.
Nick Joy is a salmon farmer. And this is just one of the sites his company manages in the northwest of Scotland.
It must get rougher than this, though.
It does. But you don't get much more than a sort of metre wave here. I mean, that's about as big as it gets.
Wild salmon cluster in the rivers of the east, but farmed salmon is a story of the west. The deep sea lochs can support what's become a billion-pound industry.
So how do you arrive at this spot? What's good about this spot?
Well, it's depth, it's current. You're basically trying to get good water. It's a simple one. Good water and shelter. Those are the two.
Shelter from the surrounding islands?
Yes, but shelter from a big wind. I mean, Scotland's waters are not exactly the calmest in the world. If you imagine that we're in a big loch here, and all the water is going to leave, and it's all going to come back in again. So what we gain from that is that the water's moving, so we get lots of oxygenated water moving through our pens, we get strong currents. That's good for fish. Currents that change, move, means that the fish have to adjust, and that's good for mussels. It's just the same as us.
Right, and that's why your modern farmed salmon, or vaguely a properly farmed one, is a more muscular thing than it used to be. But there was a time when you could tell a piece of farmed salmon just from the fat, the thick veins of fat going through it. These fellows aren't going to have that.
Well, they'll have good fat lines. Again, it's like a lot of things. It's where the fat is. You know, the point is you want the right fat in the right places. It's just test is the taste. I mean, it's just a different flavour.
This young industry has flourished in the wildest and most remote corners of this part of Scotland.
Come see them closer up, because this net is now lifted, and the fish are going to be swum from that pen there to this one. This one has no fish in it, and is clean. So, and that's a dirty net. So what we're doing is trying to make sure that the nets are always clean, because the way they get their oxygen is from the water around the pens.
Right. How deep is it?
When it's down fully, it's 10 metres deep.
Some farms use chemicals to clean their nets, but here they raise them and allow them to clean and dry in the famous Uist winds. The salmon just swim through into the new pen.
Just like sheep, once one goes...
Huge.
That's probably about 4 kilo. The big fish in here will be, I don't know, 9 or 10 kilo.
When salmon farming started, it wasn't quite so sophisticated. The Victorians had built inland hatcheries, but salmon need time at sea to mature. And it wasn't until 1968 that a research team near Fort William successfully raised fish in a sea loch. The early years were like a gold rush. Everyone wanted to be a salmon farmer. Alan Anderson now manages this site, and he remembers when things were a lot more basic.
The enclosures, the pens that the fish are kept in, you know, you were looking at equipment that was made of wood. It was 12 feet by 12 feet, and here we are sitting on a steel structure, and each individual pen is 24 metres by 24 metres.
And they had literally wooden boxes at sea?
More or less.
And they take young salmon, chuck them in, wait for them to grow?
That's almost how
Really?
it was. In the Hebrides, for instance, now there was quite a sizable start to the industry here in the Hebrides because the water's good, clean, it's a good environment to work in. There's almost a ready workforce. And what happened was that you had crofters who are struggling to make a living, and then they saw an opportunity with this fish farming looks interesting, and they would have, you know, a couple of pens at the end of the croft in the sea, just out from the site. Put a net in there, put some fish in there, feed it, and they made a reasonable living. But then as the industry grew, they were too small, they couldn't supply the markets, they couldn't keep up with the demand, and so bigger companies come in.
So how many fish have you got?
Between 500,000 and 600,000 in a year.
The first harvest of farmed salmon near Fort William netted 14 tonnes of fish. Now, producers grow more than 140,000 tonnes a year. A fish caught in a river is subsistence food. A fish farmed and smoked can be sold worldwide. At this farm, the smokehouse is on site, and it's Ian McCreary's job to produce salmon that will be sold as far afield as America and Japan.
So, some kit?
Yeah, we'll give you some hats.
That's a hat. Marvellous. And what, boots as well?
Yeah, I'll get you some boots.
Some of the fish is cold smoked, but the rest is hot smoked to a secret recipe.
This is a very, very rare opportunity you're getting.
Really?
There's not many people that taste this come out in the oven. And again, each